Well, let's get right into our next speaker. We heard from him earlier on in our Steamy Hero session, but let's hear from him in our Professions Unplugged, because I'm really interested and looking forward to getting into a day in his life. He was recently celebrated by the Mail and Guardian as one of South Africa's 200 young South Africans. He's an architect and net zero accredited professional that started his practice, MSSA, in January 2017. He's grown the practice into an industry leader that has completed some of the most pioneering green buildings in South Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, please give it up once again for Marc Sherrat.
Afternoon, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Okay, I'm just going to take you through some of the projects that we've done as a practice. And architecture really is what some have said kind of the last great adventure. Most of the world has been discovered. Architecture is one of those industries where you can literally invent something new, think outside the box. Renzo Piano, he's an Italian architect. He's a Pritzker Prize winner. The Pritzker Prize is kind of the Nobel Prize for architects. So if we want to start with a definition for architecture, we have to start with the definition of sustainability. That's what we've specialized in. Sustainability is really trying to live within the planetary's ecological boundaries. And so we've defined our mission statement as a company from that, which is reversing local extinction through sustainable architecture. That's looking at both buildings and social problems to solve, as well as kind of ecological problems to solve. We have to solve both of those things at the same time. And we know this, living in the world's most unequal country, we have to solve social problems at the same time as environmental problems. Buildings are interesting things. They use a lot of fresh water, so that's one of the things that we need to be cognizant of. It's just we live in a country that has a limited amount of fresh water, and sometimes we get too much water. That's also kind of in Kenya in terms of climate change. We're seeing increased violence in storms. Buildings also use a lot of waste. So 40% of all waste globally is generated from buildings, a very important thing for us to take cognizance of. And then what we've done as a company is try and travel Southeast Africa and explore the intelligence that is within the vernacular environment. A lot of architectural disciplines are driven by the West, and so we said, let's start from the ground up and see kind of this shared intelligence that is across society throughout Africa. Working from the Okavango Delta in Botswana, we're seeing radical climate change in terms of the way that landscapes are changing after time. So you're seeing the Karoo change to hardcore desert. You're seeing these incredible villages like this is in Wakkerstroom, where again we lived with the community and worked with them. They protect this grassland landscape from an endangered bird species. People come from all over the world to see this endangered bird species. And this is not formally protected by some government scheme. This is, kind of informal. And this specific bird species requires that cattle grazes the land so that it doesn't become kind of, too much grass. That's really important to understand. The other R&D aspect that we look at is studying endemic species, so species found here and nowhere else in the world. This is called the baby bums stone plant, found in the succulent Karoo. And it's a plant that's quite interesting. So if you think of it like a building, its chloroplasts, which are its solar panels, are on the inside of the plant. And it's got skylights on the top to let light in. So that's an interesting component that we can translate directly into architecture. Now, if you're practicing as an architect, one of the biggest problems that we need to look at is housing. We've got almost over 2 million people in South Africa that don't have adequate housing. And the reason for that really is because that our cities are growing so quickly. 3 people an hour in terms of Johannesburg by 2025. This was a 3-year research project that looked at housing in informal settlements. And we worked with the community over a 2-year period, interviewing them and saying, what are your most difficult problems to solve? And from there, we actually we designed the solution. Fire being a primary cause of that. This is called the firehouse. Clad in CLT, which is called cross-laminated timber, actually very, very good when it comes to fire. But importantly, a lot of fire in informal settlements happens from people keeping their paraffin stoves over winter for heating, and that causes fire. So this project is specifically designed that needs no active heating during winter, again, reducing that kind of risk for fire. The building also protects itself from fire. Another scale, healthcare. Out of the 2 kind of building typologies, housing and healthcare are probably the 2 most difficult types to get sustainable. This is us working with informal waste recyclers and how we can use plastic and the recycling of plastic as a building material. Basically, these plastic bottles clad the outside of the building. That's a double glazed facade and act as a solar shading device. Very kind of cost effective when it comes to protecting sunlight coming into the building, as well as kind of a privacy layer for obviously the patients within that. Importantly, what you're seeing in the building is that you can access it as a pedestrian from the street. You don't have to go through 1,000 layers of security to get into healthcare. Within these bottles are air sensors that monitor air pollution, and they change color at night depending on the surrounding air pollution. So we try to take something invisible like COVID, something that's dangerous to your health in terms of air pollution, and making it physically understandable for people to see. This is generally dealing with pollution around vehicles. The inside of the building, what it looks like, again, a lot of natural materials, celebrating local sourcing. And the roof area, we're very bad in South Africa. Our roofs are kind of left for the air conditioning. We got wonderful weather. Let's use that and create outdoor spaces on our roofs. Another scale, architects are not just involved in kind of buildings in terms of the professional liability around creating a safe building, but we're also designing the spaces between buildings, public transport systems, parks. This is a project we are working with city parks around homelessness. If you know Johannesburg, this is one of the longest parks in the world along the Braamfontein-Spruit in Johannesburg. And this guy really became our hero, Alfred Mkhize. He's been living in this park for over 30 years. And so we argued to city parks, what is your client? Is it the guy who walks his dog for half an hour on a Sunday? Or is it the man who spent 30 years of his life living in this park? This is an on-site interview with him, and he's one of these, again, informal waste recyclers. So understanding the microeconomy of how the waste recycling system works, very, very sustainable, even though it's informal. But he gave us the idea in terms of urban farming. How could we bring urban farming into our parks? He'd actually started it and had been stopped by city parks because there's no existing policy within the city to support this. So we wanted to develop a project around that supports urban farming. So he would be employed in terms of farming within the park. This would produce high quality produce that would be sold to local restaurants. And we've got a specialist in urban farming to support us on that. The Elephant Migration Route project is something I presented this morning. Maybe some of you were here. I've just included it just to, again, see kind of what happens within the rural space. Architecture is not just about cities. It's also about what happens in the rural space. So this is an elephant migration route that we designed. It's 1,000 kilometers long. And why elephants? Well, basically, they are an endangered species. When my son, who's just been born, is 20 years old, they'll be extinct if they carry on the way that we're kind of just decimating their population. But within South Africa, we have an overpopulation of elephant within our conservation areas. So this is an interesting thing. It's an endangered animal, but we have too many. So what do we do about that problem? Elephants are not designed to be kept in conservation areas. They're migratory species. They need to move. So electric fences, eventually the young males are going to break those things. And so kind of they need to be given extra land to move. This is really a diagram of our 1,000 kilometer migration route. You can see Kruger on the side, you can see Johannesburg at the bottom. So trying to connect the existing areas that already have elephant with the red areas that would be new areas, generally along privately owned land. And there's two architectural devices or technological devices within this project. One is called an infrasound tower. So we worked with musicians that understand elephant acoustic language that generally functions at an infrasonic level below 20 hertz, and design a language in which to communicate them to use the route. Elephants are incredibly intelligent, and we're still starting to understand all the language in the way in which they communicate. So what we know is that there's different dialects across Africa, that elephants speak different dialects across Africa. They're here to about 4 kilometers away, and within that information is the sex of the animal, if they know you or not, if you're a family unit, all this information we're just starting to understand. But the elephant has really been used as kind of a tourism marker. You know, people come from all over the world to see our elephants, but yet we're consuming them in terms of meat and ivory. So there's a way in which we need to rebrand the elephant as part of African identity again. It's not just a resource, but something incredibly important to sustain ecosystems. This is the marula tree, which is very commonly known, as most of us will know, within the Limpopo province, kind of a staple food. Higher vitamin C than an orange, seeds full of protein, incredibly important in terms of staple food. So what happened if we could feed the elephants these fruits? Their kind of ecological role within the ecosystem is seed dispersal, so they would be able to disperse these seeds within their dung. Over a period of time, 5 years, marulas are very fast growing, about 1.5 meters per year. You'd be able to restore kind of degraded land. And by year 10, you're looking at an 18-meter tree that is increasingly supporting food security within these rural areas. And what happens if elephants have to move through cities? How would that, as us, have to change as people the way we use our city to kind of house something as difficult as an elephant can be? This is our professional team. As an architect, you're generally a leader of a very diverse professional team, sets of engineers, quantity surveyors, which are really the accountants of the building industry, your client, the builder, and your skill is to be able to work these different highly skilled individuals into one vision, into one team, achieving one goal. So kind of in this team, you've got musicians, you've got electrical engineers, sound engineers, conservationists, elephant behavioral experts, and all of them need to pull in the same direction, and that's really your role, kind of a jack of all trades in that sense. And this is quite exciting, world first. This is how the camera system works on the tower that the elephants move across fence lines. So you've got an AI camera system that identifies what an elephant looks like and only opens a gate for a fence for that animal alone. So you can keep other dangerous game like lions and other things, or you can keep cattle. You don't have to change your existing use of land. And this was a world first in terms of just teaching the AI what an elephant looks like so that it only opens for that animal. And obviously the elephant gets attracted by this infrasound that we've designed or composed with our musicians. This is my last slide. So this is trying to, sustainability sometimes means solar panels on your roof. It means kind of renewable energy. A lot of it's imported from the West. But I think Africans, we fail to realize that we are already the most sustainable continent in the world. We are already the world leaders when it comes to sustainability. This is a diagram produced by anthropologist James Sussman. He spent about 20 years with the San. And his argument is that the most successful civilization should be based on how long they've been able to sustain their civilization over the time period. And if we use that as the definition, the San are the most successful civilization of all time, being able to sustain their culture for over 10,000 years. This is their worldview, so it's kind of centered around water. They've got a hunting ground where they get all their medicine and all their food from. They live off about 120 different plant species, plant-rich diet with a little bit of meat. Their camp is what's called net zero carbon. Everything biodegrades back into the environment, can be recycled and reused. And then they've got two spiritual dimensions, the sky, which I've superimposed personal dreams on, and the underworld, which I've superimposed governing authority on. So really the excitement as us as Africans and the cities that we're designing as architects is that we really have to remember what sustainability is more than kind of relearn it from some Western pedagogy. So that's it from me. Thank you very much for your time.